Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're moving on to our regular board meeting. I'd like to start out by with a roll call vote, starting with Joe.
Here.
Jen.
Here.
Yana. Here. Nicole.
Here.
And John. I believe we have John virtual.
I'm here, sorry.
And we do have John, great. So, and I'm here as well, so we do have a quorum. Jen, has this meeting been properly noticed?
It has.
Okay, thank you. We read the equity statement before the annual meeting, but I'd like to start out by reading it again because I really think we need to be grounding ourselves in our equity work at each meeting. Each student has access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, ability, language, family background, or family income. Our VASD mission statement: each student will acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to achieve personal goals, thrive in a global society, and lead a healthy, self-fulfilling life. If we could take a look at the rest of the agenda, is there a motion to adopt this meeting's agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion from Jen. There's a second.
Second.
Second from, I think, Joe got that one. All in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as is, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted. With that, we are going to move directly into the superintendent's report.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for part 3 of tonight's events, and we're excited to open up with our most recent evidence of scholarly activity and leadership with our summer school update that just closed down last Friday. And so we're happy to present the results, and joining us are Dr. Hawkins and Ms. Marquardt. Ready?
Oh, yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here. It's been an amazing day of learning with our leaders, and then we get to finish it up, spending our evening with you all.
We appreciate the long day.
Yeah, it's a great way.
Keyword evening.
Thank you. But we're pleased to talk about summer school and just share a little bit voices of our students, but more importantly, the celebrations that have occurred this year. So I'm joined today by Laura Marquardt. She is the Dean of Students at Sugar Creek Elementary. But this year we were able to do something different. We started off planning in January, and that planning was led by Pam Hammond. She's the high school principal, and she had served as a summer school principal for several years. And what we realized is that we have to build capacity. We have to train future leaders. And so summer school is an amazing opportunity for us to train leaders, as well as offer a variety of enrichment and credit earning courses to our students. So this year, we did some things different. We had 2 central sites. We had an elementary site at Sugar Creek, and then we had a secondary site, which was at the high school. And so we were able to introduce our middle schoolers to the high school by inviting them to join the upperclassmen at the high school. And it was such an amazing opportunity for them. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Actually, before we do that, Laura has created an amazing video. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And so you'll be able to watch and hear the voices of our students, after which you'll be followed by Laura Marquardt.
Summer school was filled with happy students learning, playing, and growing throughout the halls of Sugar Creek Elementary and Verona Area High School. Over 800 students have participated in person and almost 300 virtually in over 60 classes. Students have participated in art, music, cooking, fishing, literacy and math courses, physical education, Chinese and Spanish language, diversity, and school readiness from getting ready for kindergarten to rising up to high school. And the list goes on. We offered a vibrant enrichment program for pre-K through 12 students where skills were embedded in every class. And opportunities for high school students to earn credit for graduation, so that all students and teachers can celebrate the joy of learning. Please take a moment to hear from some of our scholars about their experiences here this summer. What kind of books do you like to read, Gunnar? Awesome. What else did you tell me you liked about summer school? Oh, good. Dear, what do you like about summer school? Do you have a favorite book to read? Oh, David, that's a silly one, isn't it? Awesome. Thanks, guys. Say just one of your favorite things. Making new friends, I love it. How about you? Awesome. Can you tell me something you learned here at summer school? We'll start on this side this time. What's something you're learning about? Learning about sharks. Awesome. How about you, Sis? You learned about elephants? Elephants? Do you love animals? Yes. See? All right, gracias. Hasta luego. William, do you want to tell me what you like about summer school again? Cool, we get to the library. What do you like about summer school? Why do you love science? You tell me something you made in science. Thank you to students, families, and Verona area school district staff for making this a summer to remember.
Usually we get shown up like by the kids being here, but now we've gotten shown up by the
I
video.
know.
So much more entertaining than what we're doing. That's wonderful to see.
So special thanks to Pam Hammond, who served as the principal and the leader, facilitator, and organizer, and helped Corey Zimmerman. He was the high school site leader, and Laura Morcourt, who was our elementary leader. So I'll allow Laura to share more interesting information about summer school.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hawkins, and thank you, Board, also for letting us be here tonight. This was a really great leadership opportunity. I was really excited to get to be a part of it. As you heard in the video, we had over 800 students participating in person, over 300 students virtually, over 60 courses offered from kids just going into kindergarten through high school, and over 100 staff members, principals, teachers, educational assistants, librarians, special ed assistants, technology, food service, and custodial staff that helped make this a success throughout the month of July. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to hear the voices of our staff members that participated as well. And so that last week of summer school, we sent out a survey to every staff member who was a part of our program, asking them what went well, what would they like to have known more about, ideas for the future. And so I just wanted to share some of the highlights from that survey with you and the appreciations that staff had this year. They were really appreciative of the food that we had for kids. We had breakfast, we had snack midday, and a lunch that they could take home with them because it was from 8 to noon. We realized very quickly breakfast and lunch wasn't enough. Kids are hungry, so we were able to fulfill that need right away to make sure that every child was fed and able to learn the whole time. The assistance that we had from support staff with EAs and SEAs in classrooms, out at recess at the elementary level as well, was a huge success and help for teachers. Having time for collaboration between classrooms so that older students and younger students could work together and do some learning from one another. Staff said they just loved being able to see the kids. For our summer school program, all of our staff gets to propose a course. And so they're teaching about things that they love and that they're passionate about and embedding those skills to ensure learning. And so just being able to really enjoy and celebrate that joy of learning with kids was great. This year we had a professional development day, the day before class started, to talk about some of our planning and learning about assessing standards with students. And so having that time to talk with staff and really make sure everybody understood the expectations was great. Staff also really appreciated the time to prepare their classrooms for kids to enter the next day as well. And so they felt that it just created a really organized environment that everybody was really ready to go on that first day. The flexibility and the amount of student engagement that was able to have during summer school was huge. They really appreciated that we're keeping class sizes lower, under 20, so that they have that more personal experience one-on-one with kids. And then we did have them report back as well on their assessments that they did. And of the teachers that completed the survey, which is over half of them, we had about 54 surveys when they last checked. Over half of those teachers said that 90% or more of their students were meeting or exceeding the standards that they were hoping to gain throughout the summer. And several other were 80 and above as well, but it was really great to see that they saw great growth throughout those either 2-week or 4-week classes that they had. And so just from that experience and throughout the month of talking to people throughout the month and reading over our survey results, some initial goals we have for the future, moving into future years, are really making sure that we're continuing to communicate and develop our standards and assessment practices during summer school so that staff are really aware of the expectations that they have and that they're developing their courses with that in mind from the beginning. Continuing to offer professional development to teachers and staff to ensure everyone's prepared for the first day of classes will be really helpful. Ensuring we continue to give staff voice and choice in course descriptions and proposals so that we really do continue to have that just joyful learning environment where everybody's working together. And we also want to obviously ensure that we are providing a program that's diverse, inclusive, and equitable for all students and families.
And again, we had an amazing summer school, did some things a little differently. Having that first day to allow for professional development was a new practice, along with, I know at the secondary level, they surveyed students and got received input from them on the types of classes that they wanted to participate in. So we're looking forward to, in fact, we've already started planning for next summer and things that we're going to do to have an even better and a better summer school program next year. So thank you.
Thank you for the update. It's wonderful to see all the active learning, the smiles, and I just really appreciate the work that went into this.
I'd like to also say thank you. First, Laura did a phenomenal job, as well as Corey over at the high school. And it wasn't, people say phenomenal job. It doesn't, but this was us going on site, seeing classes in action, listening to students, interacting with staff, and all had a similar message around the leadership at both sites and the strong outcomes for our students. So, say genuine, authentic, evidence-based. Thank you for your work. Also, we don't take lightly what it means to make sure that we have a clear path for leadership trajectory within our organization. And thank you for lifting that up as an opportunity, Dr. Hawkins, and thank you, Laura, for stepping in and going on that trajectory. You're well on your way, and we're proud of what you accomplished this year.
Thank you very much.
I just add a gratitude to all of the teachers that participate. I appreciate that the frame of our district has really always centered around enrichment and not sort of remediation for summer school. And I think that foundation it was obvious that that is valuable to staff, that we're not scrambling in this district to create a summer school program, that we have the ability to survey students and be responsive to what they want because we have staff that are eager and willing to be part of this. I think is a testament to a lot that our district is doing well, and to you all as leaders, that folks want to be a part of this, that they see the structures that are needed to support kids throughout those weeks is just phenomenal. So a thank you to all the staff and teachers out there that worked summer school. It's just a great thing that we have going on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Are you okay? Thanks. How are families alerted who have children just entering kindergarten? How does that message get out to families in the preparation for kindergarten space?
Was she speaking specifically about summer school? So that information was sent out to the 4K programs through Jennifer Skiba. And so information was shared and then students were able to participate, correct?
Yes, we sent out, they received the full district emails about it. And then we also did targeted messages through BAFI to all pre-K families, reminding them during registration periods as well.
Gotcha. So only families who choose to partake in the VASD 4K programs, not families that choose other forms of daycare or wraparound care. Those families aren't communicated to, correct?
For this year, so this was our first year offering programming for our 4K students. So as we move forward and as we've learned from this experience, we will know to target additional childcare centers. This is the first year that we've ever offered any type of programming for a 4K student. So I want to say we spent some time learning, what do our youngest learners need? And then next year we'll be able to expand it to other sites.
I think that's completely reasonable. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question too that just occurred to me? Sorry. I appreciate what you said about building the capacity for assessments to be a part of the programming in summer school. But one thought I had was, is there a way for us to track when we do our fall testing and look at the cohort of students that participated in summer school to see both whether there's any movement from spring of last year, but also to see relative to other students in that traditional summer, summer slump or step backwards. I'd love to just see some of that objective data that shows the value in the numbers that our summer school program has.
Absolutely. That hasn't been done before in the past, but that's certainly something we can begin to look into to see how we can not track, but how we can measure and or assess the value of summer school and does it impact learning when students go into the fall. So it's something we certainly can look into.
Great, thank you.
Joe, I'm not sure that a traditional metrics going to give you that data. Our goal in summer school is to really reinstill the joy of learning. And so it may be that sense of belonging metric or that sense of do I enjoy school metric that we would lean into with some additional, traditional, but it's going to be more of the emotional connection to being a learner again that we're going to be looking for. And that's what our goal was with summer school this year. Like we really want students to find that joy in being a learner again.
Great, thank you.
Every time you stand up, they call you back. So. All right, thank you again, Dr. Hawkins. So just wanted to make sure you have the next slide that has a pyramid. And all right. we're going to transition to a draft, a draft until we say final of our organizational structure and provide an update. This is a combination of multiple factors coming together. The triangle on the top, this is a source of memory, is the transformational leadership model that we discussed deeply, mostly in the fall of last year. And that was a space where we were leaning into making sure that we collected the voices of our classrooms, teachers, leaders, etc., and really using that voice and to allow the board, superintendent, and leadership officer to make action based off that action. And that's where you see kind of this inverted pyramid model, but it actually is a symbol of transformational leadership where we are centering the priorities. That was one step in the process, and now we wanted to relook at our organizational structure to see if it's actually meeting the needs, or how do we build a structure that meets those needs. And with that, we have, as you know, realigned what was the third tier of our organization, which was the student services department, and we have aligned that with academic services, and I want to just openly say appropriately aligned with academic services, where our supports for students to the core and beyond can be done in collaboration through academic services, while the expertise of special education pupil services support that work. But we didn't want a separate silo of our organization where there wasn't that direct connect and supporting teaching learning. And so that has led to an academic services component of our organization, as well as a continued business and operations section of our organization. So I'll pause there just about the organizational structure, and then I'll talk about some of the assignments within there after that. Questions? Okay. As you've heard us begin the dialogue and in alignment with OE2 has an expectation that there's in the case of emergencies or other factors, that there's a clear line of succession in our organization, and that prompted us, and I think rightfully so, to place a deputy superintendent title and then assistant superintendent title. So Chad Weezy will be serving as the deputy superintendent, still covering business and operations side of it, and Dr. Hawkins and her expertise will be utilized with academic services and leading that work. So you'll see those two as the leaders to the left and the right, and then the directors that report to them on both sides of the organization listed. We per our communication that we send out, we did take a central office position and push that back into the classroom to support classroom outcomes in the form of 2 FTE. And we want to continue that mindset of utilizing central office as a structure support of schools as much as possible, put resources into our buildings. So I will just close out to see if there's any questions around this new design. I would say we're 95% there. If it's anyone that keeps changing things, me. So, but
We said this is our last meeting too.
I know I can't help it.
Yeah, but I think it was less than 95. So
It's getting better.
yeah, I think it may have been.
We had a triangle last time, though.
Yeah.
See? So,
Yeah.
I think it was the perfectionism. You first beat it to your team and then maybe later pull back and said it was
It's
might be.
You're not getting any jumping any time. Team's like, no, it's not you.
No one's coming to your rescue on that.
All right, fine. Okay. We'll move on.
And just to reiterate, just with the fact that this is a visual, right? That sort of the folks, listed under you, Dr. Hawkins, this is not like a hierarchy of
Correct.
bubbles. That this is the collective team of bubbles, working in tangent with your vision, the vision of the district, and really kind of push and be direct
Correct.
supports to classroom teachers and students.
Definitely not a chair. Correct.
Absolutely. At one point, we want to go out
Right.
linear, and it just didn't work.
Yeah,
But that
it's
would have
big.
probably been a better representation of the work that we do alongside each other.
Right. And then I think rightfully so, we had begun this work, but we had a request from our board of what this was going to begin to look like. I think, Jen, I think you asked for this. So this, again, is still in draft form, but we want to give you a visual of what referred to the accompanying document
Mhm.
or companion document, excuse me, to our organizational chart will look like. This is a sample of when we get all the pictures and some people see our little camera guys, so we're still trying to get
Click
get
it.
their get the pictures so we can get them in all the spots. But this is what the companion document will look like. So everyone in our organization and outside our organization will know who to contact for specific areas. I will lead as we review some of it. All of our leaders, if you're going to work in VASD, you have to lead for academic excellence and grounded in equity. So we're not going to list that every single time. And so we are going to refine some of the bullets that are in there, but this is again close to being a final document once we add the pictures and make sure that our staff and families can find out who's responsible for what aspects of our organization. You'll also have a very similar document for business and operations side that look almost exactly like this.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. This is really good.
Well, I think it's also fair to say, and this is maybe for the community a bit, but I know conversations we've been a part of that the folks on this sample slide, for example, are living and breathing, and existing in the school spaces. So I think it's fair to say classroom teachers don't need to look at this document to know who you all are, that we now have a leadership model that has these folks in schools being visible, working with teachers, which I appreciate, and I don't think comes out of a document like this, but just that philosophy in terms of how you're all approaching this work, I think is
Absolutely.
worth sharing.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think that should be highlighted at every opportunity. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
So our goal is actually have this out prior to our next board meeting. So this will be the close to the final draft as you'll see, and we'll send out one before we send it out to our full public, but this is unless we have any concerns or questions from our board. All right. All right. Now I feel like I should be Michael Buffer and welcome to the stage. So we have our academic services team here in full force with Dr. Hawkins, soon to be Dr. Jackson. We're gonna finish up soon. We're excited for and Dr. Halber. Thank you for joining us as we get ready to go into OE10. Here's the quandary of going back and forth between results and operations. Is that please remember everything you did in results last meeting, forget it, because that's not what we're doing. Operations is all about, does the value statement meet your values and does the indicator work? It's not going into the order of the actual metrics we're going to use. That's on the results side of it. So that's the kind of danger of going back and forth between operations and results, but I wanted to reframe us now. We're definitely in an operations one right now, and to look explicitly in those areas. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hawkins starting out, or Dr. Hawkins?
Yes, so what I'm going to share with you all tonight is Dr. Helber, Director of Special Education, and Tracy Williams, Director of People Services. Their work is reflective of the alignment of student services with academic services. So their work in tandem with all of our directors, our Director of Elementary, Secondary, Multilingual Programs, and then supported by Teaching and Learning, will serve as a catalyst for ongoing cycles of continuous improvement at each of our school sites. So tonight, Tracy Williams is going to present OE10, Learning Environment and Student Behavior.
Good evening. Good evening. Glad to be here again. All right. So with OE10, looking at operations monitoring, it assures that organizational performance is in alignment with the Board of Education values. The Board of Education will know true operational performance of VASD. It provides information for support and advocacy of district goals, and it monitors the superintendent's performance. OE10 I shared, you guys have a copy of it in front of you. OE10, the first one, the first component is the superintendent shall establish and maintain a learning environment that is safe, respectful, and conducive to effective learning and high student achievement. We have that listed and with the interpretation that the board values high standards related to providing a safe and positive climate that is student-centered. All students and staff feel welcomed and have a strong sense of belonging. Students and staff are cared for and supported to do their best work. The Board of Education expects the superintendent to ensure that all learning environments within the school district are safe by establishing clear expectations for student behavior and school climates that protect students' emotional and physical well-being and addresses the appropriate administrative behaviors that disrupt the teaching, learning, or operational processes of a school or the school district. With the implementation of the social emotional wellness plan, schools will have a coherent model in which to follow. Under this first one of OE10, we have definitions: safe, effective learning, disrupt, and social emotional wellness well-being plan. The social emotional wellness plan is the document I shared with you at the previous one. Okay. Now, next components of OE10, there are 6 of them. And so I will read the 10.1, but then I'll go right to the indicators. Okay. So
Just really quick. Thank you, Tracy. We want to make sure that the original OE10, that interpretation and that board expectations is the point, because everything else is built off of that. And so, you know, you've had the document, I think, for about a week, but if these 3 aren't hitting the mark, then I'm not sure that the other 6 are going to. So I just wanted to put this space, if there's any significant concerns around this, which I, as a person that's vetted these myself and with others, I don't see them as these are exactly what the board has told us each time that we've gotten together, that this is what you want us to do. But again, it's not my decision to make, but I just wanted to put that in the space of everything is built off of this initial interpretation and off this initial explanation.
I think this captures the discussion that the board had when we were putting these policies into place. And I think it's captured each snippet of conversations that we've had throughout the year when we are discussing what kind of environment for students. So for me, I think the interpretation just is exactly what we have hoped it to be.
Agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. So 10.1, superintendent will maintain a climate that is characterized by support and encouragement for student success, including the physical, mental, and emotional health of all students. And then we have 4 indicators. Indicator 1, the % of staff who are provided with nonviolent crisis intervention de-escalation training will increase each year. Indicator 2, they will show a decrease in physical aggression each year. Indicator 3, in the annual climate survey, there will be an increase in the % of students who believe VASD provides safe learning space for students. And indicator 4, the % of staff trained in trauma sensitive and restorative practices will increase each year. Any questions for 10.1?
I have a quick question. Go ahead, Nicole, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Yana. For indicator, well, actually I could ask for all the indicators, but especially 1 and 4, do we have an established baseline? And then do we have an established goal of what we'd like to increase that to?
So we have a baseline of staff that's been trained for the nonviolent crisis, but it had only been special staff like special education, SCAs, but we're moving to more staff having that experience. So move outside of just that selected group that we have so that all staff have the opportunity to get trained. And so with number 4, trauma sensitive and restorative practices, those are things I spoke about in the social emotional wellness plan, and we're starting to implement them in years 2 and 3. So this year I'm starting with training the trainers in the district so we can create a team to create the PD that will go out into the schools.
Awesome, thank you.
Kind of, I don't know, say cheating is the right word, but it's an indicator that's going to come true because we just built it into professional development plan. So everyone's going to kind of get it to it by tiered approach.
So my question was on indicator 2. Can you just describe that for me? Is that physical aggression of our staff, of our students, of our
All of the above.
board? Right, like, who
It's
is
the physical
doing
aggression. So
this?
when we were looking at data for fighting, and so it's physical aggression with students. And so we're looking to have a decrease in that.
Okay. Okay, got it.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. I go to indicator 10.2. The superintendent will ensure that all policies and procedures regarding student behavior are culturally responsive, collaboratively developed, appropriately communicated to students and parents, and enforced consistently using reasonable judgment. And the indicators that we have, indicator 1, 100% of staff will sign off that they have received and been trained on progressive response model annually. And indicator 2, evidence that progressive response model has been shared with staff, students, and the community in a variety of ways annually. Any questions about 10.2?
Can I just
I
add
have a
just a quick
question.
comment? Oh,
Okay.
you first, John.
I was just wondering if you guys could speak, and this is in the definition of terms, speak a little bit about culturally responsive. I've just never really seen it defined that way.
So with culture, the deep understanding and perspective of the potential impact that policies and practices have on different focus groups. So it's making sure that we know and look at the historical context of, similar to what Dr. Clarity shared this afternoon around our discipline literacy that had been deprived for some groups. And so we want to make sure that there's that historical context in there as we look at making sure putting practices and policies in place.
Jen, did you have something?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, which could show up in different sub points of this, but at this point, I wanted to just highlight how much I appreciate the definitions and how they are contextualized for what we're talking about. So John, maybe that kind of goes to what your comment is culturally responsive has a lot of things that could mean depending on the context. If I'm in my classroom, or in this case, we're talking specifically about safe learning environments. So I appreciate the detail and the common threads that gives us for dialogue because of those definitions.
I also, I know the term culturally responsive had gotten to be a very safe word that for not wanting to go into equity issues and biases. So it was coming around this team, and I appreciate them going deeper beyond a generic term to lift up the bias concern that goes into it. And that's what you see in the definition there.
I have a question about collaboratively developed. How do we typically go about ensuring that we get the voices of those that you have on here, so student, staff, and community?
So in the development of the social emotional wellness plan, we did focus groups, Clarity's focus groups, students, parents, staff, and staff. Also, I had this shared with the administrative team, the principals, shared it within central office. And so it's been vetted, reviewed by all teams and voices. And I'll say for the social emotional wellness plan, it's a living document because things will change and we will continue to add and modify it as needed.
Thank you.
All right, 10.3.
So I'll do 10.3. The superintendent will identify and address inequities in behavioral supports and responses. And our indicators, the first one, 100% of staff that enter Power School entries will sign off that they have been provided training and support on Power School behavior data entry processes. And indicator 2, student discipline records maintained by each school verify that discipline referrals and suspensions are generally proportionate for all student groups.
I had 2 questions actually on this one. I'll go backwards. So with, I guess in general, I got the impression in reading these that both indicators as listed are focusing more on the identify part of the policy, and the policy is identify and address. So I was just curious if I'm missing a piece or if there's an aspect of consideration around the address part of the policy. Does that question make sense?
And so what I would say is that we are we are realigning our discipline codes. So we're in the baseline of being able to identify our inequities. And so
So
from
then-
there, then we will be able to address.
Got it.
So for
Okay.
this first
So
year.
it's like a
that's what
building
we're
capacity
focusing.
piece
Yes.
that we've had to see. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
Yes, it is a building capacity piece, and it's also, again, no secret, but, and we'll just be very transparent, there weren't consistent codes across our schools.
Yes.
And so we had to start with that consistent piece first, and then move to the next layer.
Okay.
Yes.
So that kind of gets at my thought on indicator one is how that is evidence of the indicator or of the policy, but now I'm seeing that connection that it's creating consistency from the term, from the identification piece of things. So then we can get to the addressing.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And that means I'm good. Thank you.
I have a question on indicator two. Was there a specific reason that the terminology generally proportionate was used instead of just proportionate, or am I reading some meaning into it that doesn't exist?
I don't think you're reading any meaning into it. I think it was just, we don't want to guarantee that it's 100% proportionate, but that we're generally proportionate.
So I have a question on indicator 2 as well. I have a question, but I don't quite know what my question is. So let's just see what happens here. I guess, can you just talk to us a little bit about that indicator? I believe I am understanding that we're trying to ensure that certain groups are not disproportionately impacted by disciplinary referrals. But I'm trying to wrap my mind around equalizing that across the board, or like making them generally proportionate. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that? Which I don't really know what my question is. So you could also be like, Yana, that I don't understand what you're asking, because it may not be a question.
Let me talk a little bit about what we're planning to do, and maybe that will help.
Okay,
answer
I
your
think that's good.
question. We'll see how this goes.
Let's
right?
see.
So we're going to do a random sampling of our log entries, and we're going to look at them across all schools. And then we're going to compare that to, like, we're going to look at, see if they're being done with fidelity. So that's our first part, is the discipline codes that we're hoping to, that we're going to put in place, are they being basically uniformly addressed across all schools? Once we get to that point, then we're going to look at that and we're going to say, across all schools, do we have similar discipline codes across proportionate for the number of students that are going to be within that maybe focus group? So we can't really quite get there yet because we have to make sure our codes are accurate. So that's our main focus. Let's make sure the data that we have going in is going to be accurate data.
I think it's also important to point out, it says maintain. So making sure that each school, and each site is entering the data. Not that people didn't, but some people would report it and feel like I've called home and that was enough. Others would enter it in. So we're making sure that all of our principals and those, our student services staff are reporting it accurately by entering the data. So we'll have the data to then determine whether it's proportionate or not.
I'm curious to see what happens.
So you'll be excited to know that this is not a long-term away occurrence, because this begins tomorrow. This is on the agenda for the Leadership Institute, where the coding and all those processes, so that the building of the system for behavior response is being put into play. About 11 o'clock?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
I need
Maybe
to come to that session.
Wait.
Oh,
I know. And shoes in here. I think I have one other comment then, as we're discussing this, just thinking about this process of actually sort of logging things from a data entry standpoint, that is not cumbersome to staff. So I don't know that that's a question to be asked. I do recall hearing conversations from staff about how to be in the moment and be responsive to students? And when does this sort of data entry happen logistically and like mediating that for staff, which I'm guessing will hopefully be a part of what the data entry training process is, but just
We're
that's
not
coming up for me
changing
right now.
the actual form because it's in Power School. We're
Mhm.
just changing the coding so that it's consistent across all schools.
Okay.
So they already, those that have been doing the data entry and the coding of the behavior incidents, it's just shifting a little bit of what we're asking them to do.
So I have something quick. Sorry, I don't know if you can see when I raise my hand.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Oh,
see
sure.
it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
We do see it, John. Thanks for pointing that out.
Now we know to look for it.
I'm just trying not to interject my voice randomly when somebody else talks, because I know there might be a little bit of a lag. So I'm just going to preface this up front where these are the types of conversations around data that absolutely make what little hair I have left on my head stand on end. Where I hate data and I hate the notion of data collection. And I feel like the devil's in the details about how this stuff works to reinforce biases here. I would have questions, probably too many for the time that we all want to sit here, around, these student discipline records. I'm assuming that refers back to all this data that's being entered in Power School. And I'm going to shelve the litany of questions that I might have at some point down the road around, like, well, how does that data get used in a student file going forward? Like, if I'm somebody requesting student records for, college admissions or a job in the future, what data is included or not of those records? How does that work? I just have a very strong wariness when we say things like we're going to be entering in all of this behavioral based data or discipline data to Fidelity. And we're hoping that that's going to somehow not reinforce biases in the systems that we all live in. And maybe this is just me voicing a concern, because I don't know what my question would be right now, other than like, hey, let's have a 2-hour powwow about how these codes work and how the student discipline records play out, which I don't want to do. These indicators look fine. Everything looks reasonable to me. But I'm just very concerned.
Hey, John, could we hold that until we get to OE 10.4? Because I think that might be where some of those indicators pop up.
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to be less concerned by then. Sure.
It just might be more like tied to the indicators.
It may answer your question, Don, on how we share those things and where they're going.
Your concerns
Sure.
have been noted. Yep, and your concerns have been noted.
So
Perfect.
All right, 10.4.
Okay, 10.4. The superintendent will appropriately collect, use, and protect confidential student information. And our indicators, 100% of staff will sign off that they have reviewed confidentiality procedures outlined in our employee handbook. Indicator 2, the district assures that 100% of parent guardian requests for exemption for sharing student information are honored. And indicator 3, all formal student records are maintained in secure physical or electronic formats.
So John, just as I recall, I know it was way back in July of last year, so it was a year ago. We built, and you requested it in the meeting because I was sitting next to you, that the protection of records, as you were just talking about, the second paragraph, it was actually your request from back in July. Only parents or guardians have access to the information because family education rights privacy requirements are enforced with Fidelity. Because I think you were concerned about how behavior records could be used to harm students in the future, and that was something that we wanted to lift up in the interpretation based off that conversation back in July of last year, not July a month ago.
Mhm.
I can't give a thumbs up, but that sounds good.
Any other questions at 10.4?
10.5, the superintendent may not tolerate any behaviors, actions, or attitudes by adults who have contact with students that hinder the academic performance or well-being of students. Indicator 1, the percentage of students who indicate they have a very positive or somewhat positive impression of the culture and climate of VASD will increase. Indicator 2, the percentage of students who indicate they have never been physically threatened by staff members or been verbally harassed by staff members will increase.
So I have a quick question on indicator 1. I am assuming that very positive or somewhat positive are options on the survey.
On the climate survey.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, yep, I was just curious of the scale.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for 10.5?
Yes.
Yep. 10.6, the superintendent may not permit behaviors on school property and at school-sponsored events by students or by adults that cause physical or emotional harm, including any form of bullying. Indicator 1, 100% of all district employees document with their signatures that they have received and understand VASD policies and procedures, identifying expected and prohibited behaviors related to student interactions. Indicator 2, discipline data showing a reduction in the number of incidents related to physical aggression and/or disrespect annually. Indicator 3, evidence that students and families have been informed of the district's behavior standards as outlined in the progressive response model.
I have a question, and I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this. I don't see anything in here about what I think, or at least my experience, a parent with a middle schooler has with the most prominent form of bullying, which is digital, in social media or via text message or things like that. I don't see that anywhere coming through here. So I'm curious to know how you would interpret that form of bullying under this OE, but also specifically the part about what it means to be on school property with respect to social media and how that interplays with this OE.
So for cyber incidents that happen in evenings at home, we recognize that's at home and not at school. However, oftentimes many of the things that happen at home come to school, those emotions. So we address it when it impedes learning. And so then that we would take issue and do an investigation, figure out how to address it.
How can you tell where someone is when they post something to a social media site? Like, how can you really know whether something is happening on school grounds and also potentially with school property, if they're using their school issued devices?
I mean, to your point, we can to some degree tell where they are through methods that deal with technology and how we can monitor and look at IP addresses. But more importantly, does it impact the school environment? Does it impact learning? And unfortunately, oftentimes, what happens in the neighborhood, what happens in the evening, what happens on the weekends trickles into school and impacts the learning environment. And it's that catch-all that allows us to support and do what we need to do to help prevent, mitigate that type of bullying. Because you're right, it is very often to say, oh, you were on school property. Well, they were in the car, they were in the grocery store, but it impacts learning at school. And when it impacts learning, or when it impacts students, it gives us cause and an on-ramp to be able to do what we need to do to support students.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I agree with all that. I know my experience as a parent and other parents that I've talked to has been, we're not concerned about the type of bullying that, say, me and my peer groups experienced when we were in school, which is someone in the hallway comes up and says something mean to you. We're dealing with an entirely new environment. So I just want to make sure that our policies that we have, keep up with what our parents and our students are really dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
And I will say, years ago, it was said it happened in the neighborhood and we can't do anything about it. But because we now say it impacts the learning environment, that gives us a broader reach to be able to address things that may have been on the weekend or 10 o'clock at night. Well, I wasn't at school. Well, guess what? It's impacting the learning, it's impacting the student here at school, and we can address it.
Good, thank you.
Quick question, for indicator 3. I know just with some conversation that's happened in our schools and just having a brother growing up who was bullied a lot in schools, clearly every educator has to balance the tightrope walk of a child's right to privacy versus the bullier or the kid maybe having some behavioral issues and the child being bullied and their parents and wanting to know what is being done to address this situation. So can you just talk about when you say evidence that students and families have been informed of the district's behavioral standards, how does this then trickle down to a case-by-case basis? How does this maybe affect the ability to keep parents informed, but also not overreach? Because it's no parent's business how another child's being disciplined, but also they could be extremely defensive of their own child who's being bullied.
Yes, thank you. So we're talking that everyone will have access to the progressive response model. So parents will have that. And within it has the guide with the progressive steps of things that happen and possible interventions include. And so everyone has access to that to be able to look at it and determine what happens at the different levels.
Is there a course of action then for a parent to say, hey, I'm not getting answers on how this situation with my child being bullied is being addressed. And I know the general steps, but I'm not seeing the outcomes. My student's still being bullied.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So is it you want to understand the progressive, how do you inform parents or families of the progressive consequence, or what is the venue of during a progressive consequence that you learned that the student is still being bullied? How do you get that information back to the school? Is that, I'm trying to understand which one you're asking there.
I guess students and families understanding the model and students and families having confidence that the model's being enacted in a proper way are two different things to me. And I guess I'm asking more about the second, but that crazy balance of still student privacy and respect.
Could I add a wondering with it, Nicole? Just your voice kind of went in and out just a little bit. So I'm wondering if this is, because I've heard similar questions from families of, my student has felt bullied or impacted by something negatively. What is being done? And how does that cross a privacy line of not sharing what sort of consequences perhaps are happening to a student, right? But how do you ensure that that communication is done in such a way that parents feel like there is action being done as a result of potential bullying concerns? Is that kind of a fair wondering?
You summarized it very nicely. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just.
So a lot of it hinges on the communication that the principal has with the family. And so while we can't share everything, we can certainly share enough details to let a family know, here's what happened, here are the steps that have been taken, and you can infer that based on the social emotional plan, that these are the steps that have been taken. So the communication that the school has with the family is critical. You can't wait 3 days to say, oh, by the way, here's what happened. It is the principal, the teacher making contact with the family, sharing. It's the trust and the relationship that the school has built. And from there, having that open line of communication so that the family can continue to ask questions, as well as what happens after the fact, the follow-up that the principal and or the teacher has to ensure and help the family feel that something has been done, as well as even, checking in with the student to follow up on the situation, because while we do have to respect the privacy of all, I certainly can tell you enough about the situation to make a parent know that something has been done.
Correct. Dr. August, you said that perfectly, and I just want to reiterate the stance that you took of our responsibility in at the building level and at the district level as well, to do that follow-up conversation. Sometimes it's with the student and or sometimes with the parents, sometimes it's both. That even while we are doing the progressive model, it's that proactive reach out. Hey, we're taking the steps per the model. And if you say per the model, then you're not saying what the discipline actually is. Are you still receiving any bullying or anything that we need to be aware of since we began implementing our progressive plan? So it kind of gives you a timeline as well as, is it there's a lack of communication, to your point, Nicole, that there's an assumption that anything was being done because no one asked, or is it, the progressive model is working, and that's what we want to do. Yep, since we've talked, things are getting better, or no, actually things got worse, and I want to be able to talk to that, because I think what you're speaking to is if we do know if a student comes 1 or 2 times and they sense that nothing is being followed up on, then that 3rd or 4th time of coming to you is most likely not going to happen. So what you're speaking to is the importance of us taking the initiative to follow up while we're doing the progressive model along the way.
Yeah, thank you for adding to that, because I think that's, and this will be my last thought on this, because I know John has a question too, but I think that's my main question is, indicator 3 says that we will share the model. It doesn't measure families and community members, not necessarily happiness with the model, but like, was it effective? Did you have a positive experience with it? Whether or not it was someone worked with you to explain, why your children was exhibiting these bullying behaviors and how it can be fixed. So I think that's my only question on that one is, are we not really measuring the efficacy from a family perspective?
I think there's always going to be that tension between a parent wanting to know as much as possible when their child's being impacted and the confidentiality that is guaranteed to the other student. There's always going to be a gap that you're just never going to hit that sweet spot. That's where I think that the trust that action's being taken, that action is being followed through on, the communication between school and parent is just going to be so critical. I think that's going to take time to develop as we go through this process. So I'm not sure that is even something that could be measured right off the bat, because trust has to be earned and developed. Is that?
And that's where we go back to 10.2, where it is collaboratively developed, and it's a living, breathing document. So we'll be going and doing that annually with our stakeholders. And so that's where I think we'll be able to pull a little bit of that efficacy on, okay, did we hit our mark with our tool?
And does stakeholder feedback take into account the people who were involved? Right. I agree that it will take time. I'm just wondering why we're not measuring to get a baseline, I guess is my question of, I just really want to push to understand, while I 100% agree with trust, I do also think there's a way to say, is there a follow-up survey to families involved saying, do you at least feel like someone responded to you? That might be a tricky situation to get into, and I'm not here to offer solutions, because as we know in governance, that is not the board's work. But I guess that's the only kind of nuance. But thank you for kind of going off on a tangent and talking through that. I appreciate it.
All right, I think I see John's hand raised, or he's still just waving at us. I'm not sure. No, I think he raised his hand again. John?
I raised my hand again. I have a question, and this OE brought it up, but it might be relevant somewhere else. I see a lot of indicators around measuring like that, staff and parents and whatnot are aware of these systems, and that training is happening in some regards. And I'm curious, I don't know that I've seen an indicator, because I know that we had an aim towards restorative practices, developing restorative practices, particularly as a learning tool, and particularly among our students as a way of mediating conflicts. And I wonder if there's a place, or if you guys feel a need for an indicator around the uptake or increasing percentage of students who understand, whatever restorative tools we have in our emotional and well-being plan, or to the extent that the social or the restorative tools are part of this progressive response plan. I was just wondering if there's a place where like monitoring the uptick of those sort of restorative practices would be beneficial somewhere in this OE.
I want to make sure that we're keeping our focus on so we aren't really in the position to be suggesting indicators. I want to make sure that we're just keeping, are the indicators that are presented, will they reasonably help us assess whether or not we're in compliance with our policy? So we can, address as we go through, maybe in the future, if these are areas that we feel are not coming through in the evidence that we as a board feel is necessary, we can maybe evaluate that. But I don't know that we want to be in the space of recommending additional indicators. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for under 10.1, John, when we looked at indicator 4, which I think you named, I think we felt it would be disingenuous for us to think that we could have student results or student based data while we were still in the form of training staff, which is what indicator 4 indicates. And so we thought about, we actually thought the opposite, like if the board saw that we were going to pull student data and train staff at the same time, I don't think that would have been accepted. And so you wanted to make sure that we had the process of having restorative practice be a part of our culture through the appropriate training, and then look at how we are able to monitor students understanding once we got to the staff level. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
I was also going to mention John and Nicole, I think, and Joe. As I was looking at this, I was trying to 10.6. As I was looking at it, I was trying to think of the role that parents play in this conversation, right? And so as I look at 10.6, for me, I thought about the responsibility that we put on our staff to ensure that our school spaces are safe for our students. How we communicate that and troubleshoot and make sure that parents too feel that we've handled things, if I remember correctly, is another one of our OEs. I'm trying to scramble and find it, it's not working. But I do think that we had something around how we communicate with our parents, what's going on in our schools, and ensuring that our parents feel comfortable and confident that the schools are creating safe spaces for their students. I don't remember off the top of my head where that is, but I do think we put something in place for us to be able to measure that.
Are there any other questions or comments on 10.6? Before we go, I know Dr. Hawkins, soon to be Dr. Williams, Albert, you shattered any stereotypes about educators at this point about not working in the summer and having the day end at 3 o'clock. So to all of our staff and administrators, we know you've had an incredibly long day, and we are very grateful that you are still sitting here. We want to be respectful of your time, though, just because I know you have a very busy week ahead of great learning for your part. So thank you for coming in today to share with us. From the board, I want to check, are there any other questions that we have for Dr. Hardy and his team, or are we ready to move this policy into the board's hands?
Just really quickly to answer Jan's question, it was in OE9, but it was in the interpretation, not the direct policy itself.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So hearing no more questions, the members of the board have received and discussed the superintendent's interpretations and indicators for OE policy 10. I'll now accept a motion to approve the interpretation and indicators as presented so we can begin the board discussion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion from Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a second from Yana. Okay, so the board at this time can now discuss interpretations and indicators. And remember, our focus is reasonableness standard. So again, thank you to our team. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we hope that we will not keep you all much longer. So that you can actually have some rest before you're back at it tomorrow. From the board, let's kind of, if we can go through starting at the top. I think we had just kind of a general consensus that the overall interpretation of OE10 satisfied our reasonableness. Let's move on to, are there any questions or concerns about 10.1? 10.2? 10.3? 10.4, 10.5,
John, we're watching for your hand.
and 10.6.
You know,
I was just gonna say with 10.6, the OE I was looking at, Dr. Clarity, was OE3.
That's what I've said too.
Which is
Yeah.
the treatment of community stakeholders, which states that the superintendent shall maintain an organizational culture that treats parents and members of the community with respect, dignity, and courtesy. And then one of them mentions effectively handling complaints. And number 3 mentions intentionally create and maintain organizational commitment to individual differences of opinion, including people and decisions that affect them, open and honest communications at all level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the one that I would, that I was looking for. Because I remember us going back and forth with you about how can we ensure that our indicators actually show the other side? Because I think some of the indicators were like, the district will do this and we'll do that and we'll do this. Well, how do we know that parents actually felt like we handled their issue or whatever they needed? So
that's just a good reminder that our OEs are all intertwined. You know, they stand alone when we're reviewing them, but they live in the same space.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for
I
bringing
agree.
that up.
yeah, no problem.
I definitely agree with what you said with OE3. So I think we just triple down on it then, because OE9 also says reciprocal communication must be part of the process. So
Clearly we care about that.
yes, it's 3 different times we've looked at it.
So on 10.6, I do struggle with this one. I tend to give quite a bit of deference on these just because the standard we try and use to look at it. But the thing I'm having a hard time getting over is a policy that is a large part about bullying, which is very high on the radar of almost every parent, 100% of parents of middle school kids for sure, that I talk to, that doesn't make any reference at all to cyberbullying is hard for me to get to a reasonableness point. And I appreciated and agree with entirely what Dr. Hawkins said about impacting the learning environment. My problem is I don't see that anywhere in here. in the policy. And I don't want to accidentally end up with a policy that gives the impression to the public, to the community, that we aren't taking cyberbullying among our students seriously because of the policies that we approve that don't at least visibly address that problem. So that's the problem I'm having a hard time getting over now.
Is that something that would be remedied through a definition of, in the definition of bullying?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Or is it also part of the issue in how we wrote 10.6?
I had
Because
it-
the on-school property piece is in the policy statement itself.
That was a big thing I was trying
So
to
I-
struggle with.
right.
Is my problem with the policy statement or is my problem with
Right,
the
like,
interpretation?
Was the interpretation working for what the policy says? And is this a layer that we, where does the consideration come from what you're saying?
Yeah, but where I landed was, even if we took it and looked at it only in the lens of on school property or at a school event, there is still cyberbullying that takes place within. What does it mean to be on school at school? What if someone posts something on social media, but a student doesn't see it until they show up in school? Did that behavior take place in school property or out of school property? I don't want there to be confusion over whether something is subject to our policies or give the impression that we don't take cyberbullying seriously.
So with this one, would you be comfortable then with, in the definition of terms, with bullying, if we included cyberbullying in there in the definition of terms, and then in the school property or at school sponsored event, there was something added around anything that impacts the learning environment to any capacity? Or do
Yes,
we?
if there was even a single reference to cyberbullying in the
Okay.
policy to indicate that we consider cyberbullying to be bullying,
Mhm.
combined with a clarifying statement that anything that impacts learning environment, we consider to be subject to this, I would be entirely comfortable with it and think it's reasonable.
So I'm understanding, because I think that what you're saying is that you don't want it to be not specified,
Yeah.
not specifically called out, because I do think the policy reaches it. But by not naming it, there's maybe the mistaken impression that it's not being taken seriously or not being recognized or not acknowledged.
Yes,
But I do think the policy reaches it.
combined with a lack of clarity of what it means to be on school property in a digital world.
So Claire, what are your?
Yeah, so I would recommend I'll do a student addendum, deliberate or intentional behavior using words or actions, including cyberbullying intended to cause fear, intimidation, or harm. So
Great.
It'd be like a
So
two-word addendum.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay.
What about the piece about, well, I guess part of that is just our policy. I don't think that when we wrote the policy, I don't think we talked about things that happen and safety on the internet. I know that we talked about it. I don't know that. I'm just trying to see how we get to Joe's point on if it's not on school property.
Yeah,
Because
it comes through in the
Right.
interpretation. But I think, but if the interpretation, well, it says that anything that would be, that negatively impacts student learning or student performance.
Where do you see that?
In the
Oh.
second paragraph of the interpretation.
Can I?
Mhm.
I was just going to suggest, I think everybody's saying the same thing and the right thing. I think part of the issue that I see is that in our definition of terms, we define bullying pretty well. But in the OE itself, we talk about any form of bullying, and cyberbullying is a form. So I wonder if we want to add something in there like where we actually define forms of, like, there might be different forms of bullying that might be physical or emotional, cyber or in person, or whatever. But I think that Dr. Clarity pretty much hit that on the head.
So adding the cyberbullying.
I think I think the policy that we wrote, and let's just be clear, the issue is with what the board wrote. not-
Yeah, I think that is
Your
the issue.
Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely the issue. The interpretation corrected, I think the gap between our intent and our words. So that's where we appreciate, I think the interpretation that clarifies truly our intent. And maybe this is one where we need to come back as a board
Mhm.
and clean up the language.
I think so.
So it's actually more in line with what the interpretation had called out. But that wouldn't be necessarily what we do tonight. So what we do tonight, I would say that we have a motion in a second to approve the interpretations and indicators as presented with the addendum proposed by Dr. Clarity. Are there any additional comments or discussions that we as a board need to have about the interpretations and indicators? And that's a separate conversation we can circle back and have about a change in policy language at a later date.
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
that's fair? Okay, so the motion, we have a motion second with inclusion of the addendum language posed by Dr. Clarity. I think we are ready to vote. So all in favor of approving the interpretations and indicators as presented with the addendum signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed
Aye.
signify with nay. Interpretations and indicators have passed as presented with the recommendation of the addendum. So thank you all very much for your time and
Thank
work
you.
on this. We really appreciate it. This is a really important policy and one that will be hugely impactful for our students. So thank you. We're really grateful.
So
Would the board like to see this in the draft form or just note it goes in the folder with those two words added? Are you okay with that?
I think we're okay with the change being made directly. We've approved that change. And so when it's finalized,
With those two words? Okay.
So I just have a quick question about how do we, and this is probably a board question, but I don't know. It is a board question. How do we address things like policy changes that we need to
That's
make
gonna be my
I know,
question.
exactly.
before
What
a
do we
year
do?
from today? I mean, because we
Yeah.
wrote these,
well, remember, we
Not
do have that, like,
knowing.
kind of the parking lot of agenda items that we need to be looking at. So this can be one of those that we're putting in. Let's reevaluate, some of the policies. And then that's something that we can then address when we're doing an agenda. But that said, I know we have a lot of people who've been here
Yes,
a
yes,
long
yes.
time today. And I don't want to, we can circle back with in a board retreat and kind of address some review of our own policies. I do think we need to do that just as a board on a regular basis. as well.
yeah.
In the meantime, is there some process we're using now or should be using to track all these times that we've said at a meeting, oh, this is a policy that we should reevaluate and here's what we were thinking? Because
It
I'm
should
just
be
worried
coming
about
from minutes.
myself
Yep.
that if we do this 6 months from now, I'm not going to remember what I thought about
Yeah.
this.
Problem
No,
solved.
she'll,
No, it's a Rhiannon's
It's in the
got
board
the-
minutes.
Okay, good.
yeah, because I do think that, of course, this stuff looks different in action, and now it's in
Yeah,
action.
yeah.
We're like, oh, wait, that
Mhm,
tied your hands a little bit, or that's not quite what we meant, though.
mhm.
I do want to make sure that we address those things and don't just kind of let it linger.
Yeah, and that can be something that maybe is even noted on the cover sheet of the interpretation and indicators that the board had a note that the board itself wanted to revisit its policy language for. Does that help clarify in a very
Yes.
brief way? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Rhiannon.
All right, is there any public comment? We're going to move on to public comment. I can't imagine if there is.
We have no public.
We've run them all.
They're gone.
How
We
many
have
people
a
are
list of
watching on
public.
YouTube?
Will superintendent consent agenda, are there any questions about the superintendent consent agenda? Hearing none, the superintendent consent agenda has been approved as presented. The board consent agenda, let's take a look at the board's consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments about the board's consent agenda?
I'm assuming this food service
Right.
thing is something we do every year.
Mhm.
Okay,
So
That's
this is again, just a.
Mhm.
that's
I
all.
think I remember that from last year.
Yep. I don't-
Some words are just a law and we just follow the law.
I just, I just want to make sure I know what I'm agreeing
Right,
to.
exactly. We're not blindly saying yay or nay.
Hearing no additional questions or comments, the board's consent agenda has been approved as presented. Future agenda items, again, take a look at the future agenda items. Please let Rhiannon know, hopefully by the end of this week at the latest, or do you need sooner? End of this week, at the latest, if you'll be able to attend the all-staff convocation on the 25th. I want to make sure that we have as many board members as possible there. And so just please shoot Rhiannon an email, and you can just CC me so I can keep a running tab too.
That September 13th date is still wrong. It's September 12th is Monday, right? Because we are meeting Monday,
Yeah.
not Tuesday. Okay, sure.
Good catch. We also have the board workshop data retreat on Monday, August 29th. And then again, September 12th and September 26th for regular board meetings. And then we're now actually looking into October. Are we in the second Monday in
Yeah.
October or the first?
It's listed as the
This is
second on these
October 10th
dates.
is second.
So
Right.
usually it would be the 3rd and the 17th.
Is that
Or are
because
we
we have a
doing-
meeting the 26th?
Yeah,
So
are
it's
we-
not then 2 consecutive because of how September is
Yeah.
going.
The new
previous-
calendar that we,
Thank
Yeah.
you. So
To give
yeah, thank you
a
for
gap.
clarifying. So it is the 10th and then the next one would be the 24th,
yep, so second and fourth.
October.
Yes.
which seems so far away. And yet. Thank you for keeping us. in
I know, I'm like,
mind.
what do we do without you?
Randomly showing up. Okay, so everybody keep in mind the future agenda items. I'm going to ask that we spend for debrief because again, we have a lot of people here, been here. Are we've flown past the 12-hour mark at this point? I feel
They're like, yes.
yes.
12
okay.
hours, 2 hours ago.
Right, when they were electronically working at least.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Is there a second?
second,
Motion from Yana, second from Jen, all in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Officially adjourned. Thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's been a very long day for you.
Thank you, team.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you
Thank
bright and early.
you.